Друзья, еще раз всем привет.
Dear friends, hello everybody.
Наш трек «Сок будущего».
Let's continue our track, the SOC of the future. With this discussion, we are trying to sort of crown the day
Что же такое сок будущего?
and have another discussion of what the SOC of the future is, what to expect.
Какие, что нам необходимо? Модернизация, эволюция, трансформация.
Whether we need to evolve or transform, or maybe we are going to degrade completely. Maybe SOCs won't be needed at all.
Поговорить об этом мы пригласили
Now, to discuss it all, we have invited some very well-known experts in the world of SOCs.
все представители именно
Most of them,
практически все представители именно MSSP-провайдеров. Почему мы сделали
represent MSSP providers. I should probably explain why we chose
в
them.
первую очередь требуют у MSSP-провайдеров того самого, о чем мы говорили сегодня в течение всего дня.
Well, the main reason is that their clients usually request or even demand everything we've been discussing. So, Sergey Soldatov from Kaspersky Labs.
Тимур Зинатуллин.
Timur Zainatulli, Angara Security.
Тимур Хирхабаров, Бизон.
Timur Хирхабаров from Bizon.
Антон Юдаков.
Anton Yudakov, Solar JSOC.
И Алексей Павлов. Тоже
And Alexei Pavlov,
по сокам,
a very well-known expert in SOCs,
компании Positive Technologies буквально неделю назад.
who have recently joined Positive Technologies. He only joined us like a week ago. A great catch for us.
Организации непрерывно и быстро меняют свои бизнес-модели и
So organizations continuously and quite fast change their business models in order to stay competitive in terms of digital transformation. It's important for businesses to make decisions fast and make the right decisions. All this results in a tech race, and this trend can be expected to strengthen. How is it impacting cyber attacks and, cybersecurity in general? Sergey, would you like to start?
Так, значит, пункт номер первый. Мы, как защитники, мы все-таки ориентируемся на атаки. Поэтому
we are mostly looking at what the attackers are doing.
технологических систем, рост различных технологических подходов.
With the evolution of new systems and attack approaches, doesn't necessarily mean that for a new system, we need to, develop new protections. First, attack scenarios get hatched, and then, to respond to them, we come up with defense strategies, which means that our development in the future will really depend on the pace of progress on the red side. Not all attack scenarios that can be emulated in the lab need to be detected. If they are not used in the wild, they are not really used, they are not included in correlation rules. If you look up all the procedures in the minor metrics, so these are important. That's why what drives us is not the attack landscape, but rather what the attackers are really doing. Timur, continue. It will be very difficult for me to participate in this discussion because I've, been a student to these great people. At the same time, I believe that lots and lots of things do not change at all. I think, I'm sorry, I tend to kind of whine a lot, and people probably hate it, but you know what? You can use ML and AI as long as you want.
И при этом нас сломают из двух сегментов, про которые никто не знает, в том числе и заказчик, какие бы наворочено не было.
Then you get hacked from the two segments that nobody, including the client, knew about. Well, what does it help?
Вот если вы охранник физически в здании.
Now imagine that you are a security person, guard, and somebody comes over to you and asks you where the elevator is, and you look around. And you say, well, I'm sorry, I got to double check that. So I think I will be the killjoy today, and I will remind everybody that, you know what, for decades, we have not been able to address the fundamental issues. I agree with Sergey that, what SOCs do is driven by the actual attacks, not by what's technologically possible. And the new things we are saying are kind of superstructure on what's the old things. The same network protocols, the same operating systems. Like we used to have, we used to have containers, now we have Kubernetes, like a next abstraction level above containers. But everything that's, below that, it doesn't change. So if you look at attacks or detection, most of our detection activities are based on infrastructural services and attacks targeting them. So these infrastructural services, they are the foundation. Indeed, the change in technologies can bring something new around, but it's not a revolution. You've already heard some great answers. So let me talk about something different. In some respects, we're sort of trying to catch up with what the world already has. In some respects, sometimes I feel that we are at the very lead. And being lost is sometimes good. Well, think about telecom or plastic cards. The countries that, were in the front line, so to speak, had to go through many more changes than, say, African countries or Russia had to go through. And I believe that, when it comes to SOC operation, we sometimes, play the follow-up and the catch-up game, and in some cases, in some respects, we're the bleeding edge. If we are talking about modern tech development, lots of people love terms like digitalization. It's favored by the Russian state for some reason. At any IT conference, like I recently attended an IT conference for logistics, you will hear that, we have implemented ML and AI, and we have improved our forecasting of logistics. And because of that, we can use every car we have 1 extra day a year. This way, we have saved 2 billion rubles. And when I tell them, well, how about you design your new systems so that, they are secure by default? The issue of cybersecurity to them is like, lowering your anchor while your ship is at full cruise speed. So what I'm trying to say is that, sometimes new tools are not being used, but this digitalization as such is creating so much headache for the SOC, because it's very important for them during their digitalization effort to show their results, forgetting completely about cybersecurity.
Хорошо. Итак, мы поняли, что несмотря на цифровизацию,
which means that despite digitalization, the fundamental attitudes stay the same, and you seem to be in agreement on that.
профиль действий злоумышленников.
Are you seeing any change in what the threat actors are doing? Like, are they using new technologies? Or are they, pretty much trying to do the same old things? Are you seeing some more sophisticated mass attacks, for example? Am I the first person to answer again? How about we start with the middle? Timur, you were looking at me askance. Okay. In my opinion, and this is rather the corporate position than my own, over the past year, we have not really seen any significant change in the threat landscape. Well, say 2019 was the boom year for ransomware or locker type attacks. They reached a plateau and they stay at this plateau. We are not really seeing anything dramatically new. So perps continue using this pretty primitive but still quite effective methods. They still send you an exe file archived, and you will still have like 10% users opening it. So the landscape itself does not change. Simple methods still are used, and they still work. Okay, people are experimenting with frameworks now. Previously, they were just Meterpreter and Cobalt, and everything else was pretty rare. Now, we are seeing some other frameworks, like Lever, has been used a lot in attacks targeting Russia, and Mythic, which could not even be seen previously. This is a new framework. And talking about the global landscape, yes, there are new frameworks out there as well. And they are effectively evasion-driven, such as Blue Ratel. So these new frameworks, they are indeed using lots of circumnavigation techniques. But I don't really see, dramatic shifts. I believe the landscape as a whole is on a plateau. We live on a plateau, to misquote Nirvana. Right.
Раскраска типового инцидента по таймлайну, она будет там одни и те же ТТПшки.
I believe that you are going to see the same things like as you analyze your incidents. And I will agree with Timur. The basic set, so to speak, has not really changed. Sometimes you see some delay line spoofing and other things that, your regular audit systems are not really good at discovering as commercial SOCs. We can actually step in and create some value. Effectively, we start collecting telemetry at a lower level, but the weighted average profile, so to speak, is still the same. Anything you'd like to add? I'm actually surprised to hear your answers, guys. Let me give you a simple analogy. When cryptocurrencies hit the market, lockers became all the thing, right? They became all the rage. I believe some people will not see this connection, but I'm sure it's there. And I think it was yesterday that I heard about the triangulation operation staged by Kaspersky Labs. So perpetrators were able to abuse the AI engine in iPhones. How about that? So there have been changes like this, and I believe they're quite global. If we're talking about some local, for the infrastructures that we serve, what I can tell is like this. For some threat actors, we are seeing a significant increase in their qualifications and in the range of tools they're using. It's like an obvious trend. Some players out there became observably more qualified.
Для того, чтобы более квалифицированного злоумышленника иметь возможность детектировать ему
Now, this means that, we got to up our game as well.
И да, и нет. Я и согласен, и не согласен.
Both yes and no. I agree and I disagree.
Дешевле, чем Хакин, и у тебя, или хэк.
I believe that, many of them have realized that login is cheaper than hacking, so valid accounts are growing. Look at our experience. Valid accounts 30%. 30% is phishing, and the remainder is public-facing applications, and valid accounts have grown by like 70%. Does that mean that the landscape is getting more sophisticated? I'm not so sure. I think the vector is changing, but the methods stay the same. The way I say it is like this. As long as old attacks work, threat actors are not going to modify them. Why fix if it's not broken? Some companies still have not patched their 2-year-old exchange vulnerability. So you recently published an MDR report, right? Now, what I observed there is that this leaks from builders and Logbit, they were like that for reasons, so to speak. No, I use the word commodization there. So when somebody great develops something, it becomes a mess thing. We're not going to discuss why it became a mess thing. Maybe it got stolen or it got leaked, or maybe they're trying to cover their tracks up. I'm not so sure about it. And after all, I'm no big expert in TI, but tools of the great are being reused. So that's the first trend I'm seeing. Another big trend is spear phishing generated by ChatGPT and the whole caboodle. We're seeing it everywhere. So I've been talking to a person I probably should not name here, discussing matters of threat intelligence. What are we seeing here? Naturally, we are trying to detect certain techniques. We are fine-tuning our detection systems, and the attackers obviously are modifying their procedures as well, depending on what is being detected, what's not.
Ну, там, не знаю, вы говорите про кластеры активности, да, вот какую атрибуцию делаете, там артефакты повторяются.
You do your attribution based on artifacts, right?
Когда мы продетективаем, там немножко эти артефакты
меняются. So when we detect something, artifacts start changing.
Такого рода модификация, она в деталях как бы есть, видно, что ребята мутируют.
Which means at a detail level, yes, we are seeing some modification. They are doing their analysis as well, but there is no radical change happening. And the reason for that is that the underlying technologies are not changing because we're still using the same operating systems, and their architecture has not really changed over the past decade.
Ну, ты правильно сказал, радикальных изменений не происходит.
Yeah, you're right. No radical change is happening. And the changes we are seeing are not really sophisticated. So there was evasion track yesterday where I was also involved. And the practice is, for the practical part of the case, so to speak, is that, we are seeing some very sophisticated things. I'm sorry, we know of them, but they're not really being used. Once they become part of the framework, like Cobalt or Metapredator, then they will be kind of observed. But these are too sophisticated evasion techniques. Like, perpetrators don't want to waste their time. Like, why would they want to complicate their lives at, say, payload preparation stage?
Да, ну, я чуть-чуть добавлю.
Let me add a bit here.
Мне кажется, что вот это все происходит ровно потому, что удорожать...
I believe all this is happening because it makes no sense for the perpetrators to make their attacks more expensive. If what they do doesn't work with one company, they can easily choose another one. Well, if you're an APT and you need to hack a particular player, that's a totally different case. But APTs do not really drive the whole landscape of threats. The cost of attack currently is very low, particularly given easy availability of frameworks, given that to modify them is not too difficult. There are still companies out there that still do proxy logons. And the initial penetration vectors, they are cyclical. Sometimes they prefer phishing, or they will be hitting specific vulnerabilities. You will remember that last year, cracking Bittrex servers was all the rage. But it's cyclical because radically new things are not emerging. And, they say, do supply chain attack. Indeed, it's so easy. Like, you hack one company, and this way you get access to 10 other companies. It's cheap, and it works. That's why it's used.
Хорошо. То есть получается, что базовые принципы у нас остаются неизменными.
Which means that the underlying principles are the same for the IT infrastructure, and the activities of the perpetrators do not change dramatically either. Okay. And how should then SOC work? Because traditionally the understanding was that the more logs you have, the more correlation rules, the more kind of alerts you have, the more effective you are. Is that really the case?
Справляется SOC с нагрузкой в этом или нет, Алексей?
Alexei?
Мне кажется, сейчас все коллеги меня поддержат. Людей не
I think everybody will support me on that. I don't think anyone here has enough people. we all have open positions, and filling those vacancies is becoming more and more difficult. Development, internal development can only get you so far, because the number of clients will grow, and how much you gotta be immersed in what these clients do is also growing, and the average qualifications of the threat actors is also growing. So we do say that we need to automate what we do. It doesn't really mean automating everything or automating response.
Но, на мой взгляд, вот сейчас ближайший тренд, как действительно можно разгрузить аналитиков сока,
But the way to decrease the workload on the analysts is to support their decision-making, like creating event chains, doing other analytical support for them. That's what's required. Because, if your analysts have to look for information on the CM, they can easily waste a lot of time. I'm expecting such tools to become available very soon. Some players are trying to develop it on their own. That's a question to the vendors, right, Sergey? Ideally, one see it as part of the tool set. That should help the industry immensely. Naturally, response and auto-response through EDR or other tools. For some scenarios would make sense. Naturally, you cannot automate your responses to all scenarios, but some simple things should not be too difficult. Again, without the analytical support of decision-making, we won't get far. Just look at the SLAs of any SOC. I think they're all very similar. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Why is this the case? Because you got to analyze everything, right? And it takes time to connect. And, the previous report on time to detect was along the same lines. Anybody would like to add anything? I want to correct your initial statement. We do not need to collect logs. I think this is an erroneous idea. We do not need to maximize the number of logs we're collecting.
Есть такой дядька Маркус Ранум, он очень старый.
Marcus Ranum, he used to work for Checkpoint.
Так вот, у него есть старая статья 96-го года.
So there is, he's like ancient, and he published this great article in 1996 entitled Six Dumbest Security Ideas. And one of the first items here is that you don't want to collect more logs than you need. So if you need to do forensics, like if your system went down and you cannot get any logs, you will be sorry about that. But if you want to detect, the best idea is to collect just as many logs as you need to do the detection.
У тебя есть события, на которые настроен детект, окей, если ты будешь собирать только их...
Okay, you have some events you're detecting for. Well, if you're only collecting these logs, forensics will have a hard time. I do agree with the Pareto rule, and I do agree that collecting everything is dumb. Exactly. That was the nature of my question. What do you think is sufficient? Timur? I think that detection itself has become more of a holonic notion, because we now have log routers and preloaders. We can spend quite a lot of time talking about different types of automation. Why do we have log routers? Well, because it's partially related to AML, and also the logs of web servers. And MLs get trained on this stuff. And the tools themselves, they cannot be reused. I would be happy to grab a model with the direct alerts of other SOCs, but it cannot be implemented because operationally we are very different. And I don't see much sense in sort of comparing our EPSs. It makes little sense. You know, content development should not be reduced to rules. We also need to implement the whole ICD pipeline and test automation and DevOps and Caldera. So the whole notion of detection, I think, has become more variated and deeper, and you know, it has acquired new meanings. How about we publish public standards where we say, well, that's what we're using, frameworks. You know, there is a great standard dating back to 2003. You know, Carnegie Mellon tried redesigning the handbook on CSAC. So in the prologue, they state the only thing we were able to update compared to version 1 is examples, and everything else stays the same. You know, it gets more complex, but, you know, the underlying standards are the same. Well, I was talking about life hacks like ML engines or standalone databases. Okay, we've discussed detection. Let's move on. Now, if the infrastructure stays the same, and if hackers are using the same kind of approaches, then we got to use only what's really useful and needed. Do SOCs really need to change? Do they need to transform? And if so, what kind of qualities will be important to them and which not?
Давайте, не знаю, я попробую начать.
I'll try answering first. We gotta change, but I believe these changes have little to do with the change in technologies, but rather with the increase in workload on SOCs and the analysts. I guess we all have the same issue here. We have high workload for the analysts themselves. Too many alerts, too many rules get triggered. We got to find a workaround here. I believe that all the key changes we are going to see and what's gonna, you know, promote the development of SOCs is not really about improved detection. I think we're all pretty good at that. You know, we're all doing proper MITRE coverage. We already understand the number of rules does not really correlate too much with the quality of detection. And now we are trying to reduce the workload on the analysts. Automation is certainly helping. That's why we are automating. You know, we are building a script upon a script upon a script.
Там так или иначе, может быть, не знаю, все, не все, но, на мой взгляд, как бы, наверное, все.
I'm not sure if it's true for everybody, but I guess most people present here today are already implementing ML.
Ну, наверное, я бы сказал, что для детекта в меньшей степени все.
For detection purposes, but you know what? We've got enough alerts already, so we need ML primarily to reduce the workload. That's where the development is going to take us, or at least that's how I see it. So AI should help us in terms of creating those assistants who will help us make decisions, who will also simplify interaction with the, you know, specific systems. So rather than sending a query to CM, we should be able to ask the assistant, virtual assistant, to do that. This way, we should be able to delegate some routine work to AI, giving the analysts a bit more time so that, you know, they stay alive, they do not burn out. I believe the prime mover in the development of SOCs is around reducing the workload on the analysts. Thank you.
Давай я добавлю, потому что я хотел накинуть еще в предыдущий вопрос. Прям что-то понимаю.
I actually wanted to say a few words about the previous question. I've got a message for the vendors.
Вот прям реально есть история, что некоторые вендоры, зарубежные, например, много...
Some vendors, foreign vendors, for example, quite a long time ago,
целиком, да, и решение, и какой-то
wanted to provide, you know, holistic solutions, not just a product, but also something on top of that.
Определенном вендоре, вместо того, чтобы пойти в историю какой-либо интеграции с внешними системами определенного,
rather than doing integration with external systems,
закрытые протоколы взаимодействия,
you know, vendors would develop some proprietary protocols. And besides their ICS systems, they will also try providing some cyber security solutions. Currently, we don't get to see that much. At the same time, we are seeing some Russian solutions, old and new ones, which are not entirely secure, which is surprising given the current landscape, given the current situation. And that makes basic detection sort of difficult. Well, take, for example, a VPN solution from a Russian vendor. It does a lot of logs. It does a lot of logging. At the same time, it doesn't log such important things as the end of a VPN session or messages from a particular firewall come with a huge delay because, it was not expected to do the logging. So my request to the Russian vendors is to catch up in this respect.
Таким огромным желанием противодействовать любому уровню злоумышленника, использование достаточно широкого набора средств защиты создали проблему намеренную роста нагрузки.
You know what? We have increased our own workload.
Абсолютно разными.
And, we are requiring many more clients. And we made matters even worse for ourselves. But then it was sort of intentional.
Кажется, я про это должен рассказать чуть позже, где-то.
I think I should go into detail a bit later. Otherwise, I will steal too much time from the others.
Я, пожалуй, кажется, не SOC должен меняться.
I don't think it's the SOC that should be changing under the current conditions. I think that currently SOCs are pretty good at addressing the needs of their clients. What I've seen is that the less mature an organization is, the more they demand from SOC. Because that's like, the only tool that gives some visibility to the security professionals of their or into their organization. So they say, well, do the network profiling. And check who is accessing the network, bypassing the proxies, and so on. So, for some reason, information security people internally expect the SOC, external SOC, to do their hygiene work. And you know what? It is funny that, clients get caught in this really dumb incident. And it's not really that much about detection. It is primarily about organizational engagement and the role of the service manager, because the service manager should be the conduit for all these ideas. Now, response is another important discussion to have. You can come to a sort of agreement. But you know what? Clients don't really trust us. They always want to be able to pull a switch and everything. I think it's important for us to learn to come to an agreement. Like, what are the terms when you are prepared to, delegate at least some of the response to the service provider? And, if you don't really have to, call the phone, get the approval, if you can simply initiate a ticket, that will make life so much easier. See, people are already leaving. So, you know what? I want this whole discussion to be valuable to the audience. We are all practitioners, aren't we? Let's generate ideas for automation. Now, Timur has already said that we need to focus not on detection, but rather on workload reduction. I personally have a KPI on the amount of work my team needs to be able to perform without headcount expansion. Let's share the ideas we have when it comes to automation. So, naturally, there is this idea about having automation to reduce false positives. This sort of goes without saying. Well, the second one is building the kill chain. We have a project up and running for that. So for an existing alert, we want the system to be able to identify related alerts and events. and then turn this kill chain into an incident card, like generating all the descriptions. Now it's kind of easy in English. It's a bit more difficult in Russian because of the structure of the language, but it's doable. Now, when we talk about ML and detection, we seem to be interested in anomalies and incidents, but we know from practice that with machine learning, it's easier to identify normal activity. You can actually do that, and the remainder, everything that's not filtered out as legal activity, is something you may want to analyze. Would you like to continue? Yeah, that's a great subject. With ArcSight, if you haven't removed it yet, it's very, very easy to identify deviations from the normal distribution and, just go for the outliers. We started many years ago with what we call the basic controls. So you can use Boolean logic and filters that, such and such account should never, ever access such and such segments. So have such basic controls, automate them, and whenever they get triggered, see them as incidents, and inform the IT department. Oh, we have an up and running project. It's sort of more related to TI than SOC, but I'm a user. So I'm talking here about activity clusterization, particularly when you see matching IOCs, which is also, a good thing for machine learning. Now, this is something we're working on as well. It's sort of a standard task. Easy to automate, I assume. So are we building the list up, or? Sergey has mentioned so many things.
Лайфхаков, советов, что мы делаем, да, что помогает снижать нагрузку с точки зрения автоматизации. Мы тут на самом деле...
I'll try my best to add to that. We've recently been collecting statistics on which measures reduce the alerts the most. So dumb throttling and aggregation comes as number one. So, for example, if the same account is being brute forced or like the same source of scanning attempts is used, so merging it all into the same alert is a very dumb thing to do, but I mean, it's often called deduplication. Absolutely. I mean, it's very simple, but it's important. Secondly, what you show isn't just related alerts. Sergey has mentioned it now. We call it alert grouping. Like when you're identifying alerts related to the same activity. But this is like a different thing when activity or rule or a set of IOCs. So you look for something similar. It's not the same, it's not related, but it's similar. Could be similar alerts or similar indicators.
И принять то решение, которое было когда-то раньше, либо понять, что, если бы у нас...
And, you can see that, and you can decide, okay, I will use the same response we'll use last time. Or, you may discover there's so many of this that you may want to develop a whole rule for that. Now, we also have, say, profiling systems. So when, say, a rule emerges, it goes into profiling mode, and then as part of the profiling mode, it won't generate alerts. So it won't be seen, so to speak, by line one analysts. So imagine you have a new tenant, the tenant is to be profiled, and during this time, nothing gets really triggered. Now, we are currently also developing suppression rules so that analysts can, with 2 clicks in the IRB system, add not really a filter, it's rather an IRB level thingy, which results in a particular event not generating alerts. Next, we can also do TI level attribution, say indicator related to an activity or a tool. So maximizing the amount of context, maximizing the number of tools which help you take care of noisy rules, because I guess we all have good rules which create a lot of noise.
Вот. Ну, можно там долго продолжать, потому что много...
I can continue,
Буду тут отнимать микрофон, и думаю, коллеги...
but that would mean hogging the mic.
Поток ценной информации, прям правда.
Wow, this is like really, really gold nuggets.
Кажется, у нас в том или ином виде у всех прям применены, но...
It sounds like we are doing very similar things.
Будь он in-house или внешний.
And I guess that both in-house and external SOCs will need to see for themselves whether specific methods are a good fit for them or not. For in-house purposes, I'm not sure the number of issues is the same as for external SOCs or like commercial SOCs. I mean, you will have fewer kind of issues and more tools available. Now, what I previously said is very similar. In fact, I was going to get at least to the same idea. Now, we are doing more detection now, not to swamp our clients with them, but rather to develop the kill chains.
60-80%
And I think that eventually
цепочки атаки описаны за достаточно короткий промежуток времени.
We can achieve 60 to 80% of the full description of the kill chain automated.
У других соков вопросы, а на чем это сделать?
I think that other SOCs will be wondering, like, how are you going to do that? What is being used? And I understand that the tools used for that can differ.
Еще стоит обратить внимание на историю какой-либо...
It's also a good idea to consider some visualization.
Работ, в том числе по каким-то большим моделям аналитики тех данных, которые у вас уже есть. Ну, иногда визуализация дает прям гораздо более понятно.
Because, visualization will sometimes, at least, provide great results.
И какая-то мысль улетела.
Is there anything else? There was something else I forgot.
Да, ну, добавлю совершенно такие очевидные, наверное, вещи, но на всякий случай.
What I'm going to say must be
Говорили много про склейку
plain and
инцидентов
obvious. You've mentioned some, simple, typical incidents.
У разных инцидентов разные ключевые поля, соответственно, эти...
So you can use different key fields, so you can do aggregation by key fields. These key fields, however, can fail to match, and alerts will be generated.
Куча там процессов системной директории, что-то с ним происходит, если у вас...
It could be, say, numerous processes in the system directory, and you can have an alert linked to that. So you can also introduce thresholds to kind of force switch these rules off. So if you're like if you're getting like 10 false positives, similar can be done. And ArcSight did enable daily reports like this. So for example, if you see that get so many triggers done by the same rule, and you're trying to decide if you want to switch it off completely because you're generating so many false positives, what you can do is just, rather than having it generate all these alerts, you get a daily report from it, and then by the end of the week, you should be able to decide whether you want to keep it. What we're developing right now at PHD is that we want to make ML develop parsers, because there are lots of new systems being developed. Not everybody knows how to use syslog, and there's also ICS systems and what have you. So there are numerous types of logs out there. So having your ML system develop parsing, this is a great way of reducing workload on the analysts. I remember how I developed a parser for Kaspersky Lab's AVS. And, there were over 160 messages and sub-messages, and field mapping, what have you. Would you like to submit it to us? We'll put it up on the Carpet website. Now, the situation was slightly different. That was 2015.
Простые, для что начал про простое.
No, you've mentioned something simple, and this put me in mind of the following.
Прикиньте, что
what really helped us at first, like, imagine what you're gonna do with any card. Like for us, that would be a process chain, grandfather, great-grandfather process. Taking stuff out of sync, identifying the active account. Just don't forget to lowercase, it's all in the pipeline. And you can automate this augmentation. Initially, you might be thinking, well, it's only giving you seconds. But, as you increase this scope, so to speak, it will be saving you hours. I'm sorry, we MSSPs think in man-hours. So automation of enrichment can give you this simple but precious impact.
Давайте вернемся в плоскость нашего разговора. Спасибо большое за практический совет.
Thanks for this great detour.
Вот коллеги из зала задают вопрос, что получается.
I'm reading this question from the audience.
Меняться и развиваться.
You guys sound that everything is ideal. There's no point in changing or developing. All we got to do is optimize the team and automate what can be automated. And the only problem is that the clients we have are lousy and immature. Are you saying exactly that?
Давайте так. Идеальных соков не бывает всегда.
No sock is ideal.
Нет, на самом деле, сейчас.
Unfortunately, we always want to develop. So in the triad of people, process, and technologists, naturally, nothing is ideal. We want to upgrade our technologists and want to retrain our people. Take, for example, Windows log collection. So there are so many hosts, and you obviously want to collect everything in a centralized manner. Okay, then you will want to use Sysmon to have further visibility. Then you start using EDR. It has already been mentioned that we sound like it's ideal. No, obviously it isn't. And obviously EDR adds the letter R on top of Sysmon. We're not even talking about that because it's really banal. We are trying to share, the current practice. Well, it's certainly not ideal. We are in a pretty bad state. The number of processes which are sort of operational if you're an SP, it makes me think of this, famous quote, like, woe the day when I agreed to that. A very smart person said this ingenious phrase that the level of InfoSec in a company is equal or lower than the maturity of IT. However we develop, there are some things I will not be able to impact. My roadmap is choke full until 2025. There is so much to implement. But you know what? As we come to a new infrastructure, we'll see that, again, they don't have an asset model. Like, everybody needs to up their game, not just SOCs. Okay, and where do you expect them to up their game? Well, my personal pain is the asset model. I don't think we'll be able to win in this game. Maybe commercial SOCs should have to do that. I hope somebody is doing this already. Without that, it will be an uphill battle.
Количество активов — это самый яркий пример того, что...
Yeah, the number of assets is a very vivid example that, people will never agree on that. Like, ask how many assets you have on your network, and ask it, network admin, system admin, and so on. I'm a chip in here. Like, we are working with our clients in order to help them, in order to increase the level of their defenses, or rather help them do that. We are effectively acting as their advisor when it comes to developing their information security. And, in some respects, we are often telling them, no, we're not going to do that for you until you rebuild this segment, until you do profiling, until, for example, you set access control lists. I have little understanding of the audience today, but I assume it's quite diverse. I think it's very important to understand why you need SOC, what you consider a threat actor,
максимально.
What do you consider a threat? What's the max threat to you?
Как вы с этим
What are the
работаете
key
сейчас для
assets?
того, чтобы это защитить?
How you
И
go
чем вам
about
поможет
protecting
SOC? Ну, я бы
those
сказал, вот
assets?
очень важно
What could be
себе
the
поотвечать
benefit
эти
of SOC
вопросы.
to you? I think
Ну,
it's
дальше
very
в
important for
зависимости
you
от
guys to answer
вашей
these
задачи,
questions for
запроса,
yourselves. And then, depending on how you
то
answer them and what
самостоятельная
you are looking for,
попытка или строительство сока, или
you can either
использование
build your
внешнего
own SOC
провайдера, ну, в общем-то,
or turn to an
действительно взять ровно
MSSP
то, что вам нужно, и, возможно, где-то прислушаться.
and maybe, listen to other people. And everybody will tell you, gotta catch the hackers, but also look for internal violators in the business systems. Also, make sure InfoSec policies are observed and exercise controls over your suppliers and so on. The clients of SOCs really want the external SOC to do everything for them. You gotta focus. You shouldn't really expect us to be equally good at everything. Thank you, Alexei. You're touching here upon a painful subject. And how do we actually measure or assess the efficacy and the efficiency of a SOC? What's most important? Is that compliance with the SLA or something different? Maybe the first one to answer?
Был один такой заказчик DLP, у него прям лозунг был
So there was a DLP client who measured their efficiency in like 5 prison sentences a year.
Но это прям тяжело.
Funnily enough.
SLA.
But you know what? Committing this stuff to paper could be difficult. Like SLAs for detection mean nothing. Like a letter arriving in the mailbox, does it mean much? Particularly don't have IRP.
Там сервис-менеджер, аналитик, там специалист линии должен уже звонить.
Like a service manager and analyst should be calling, the client every time that happens. Time to detect that, within 20 minutes your SOC should send a report to you. Sounds great if you're really waiting for this to happen, but I don't think we should be going in this direction at all. I think we should care much more about the results of SOC engagement. Not a single interruption, or not a single day without a hacker, say, apprehended or identified, or a number of memos. Well, because our clients are actually measured by the number of disruptions they had. And I am aware that different companies will be using different KPIs. I am certain, however, that what we need is not SLAs.
На самом деле, сейчас, на мой взгляд, чуть проще говорить про эффективность сока, чем...
I think it's easier now to talk about efficiency or effectiveness of SOCs than it was like 5 years ago.
Что уровень погруженности ВБ топ-менеджмента многих компаний был...
I think that top managers of most companies
это было очень сильным вызовом, потому что...
have learned a lot about InfoSec. There was a huge challenge to us. Client-side CISOs were hugely envious. They would say anti-fraud is reporting every week that they prevented, fraud of such and such value. We would love to be able to do the same. They would say. And what are they detecting?
Сейчас ЦИСО в этой компании может объяснить,
to what extent can the CISO, the CISO,
внешнем атаку на ранней стадии, там, не знаю.
Like imagine that they've detected an early stage attack, like, somebody breached through the perimeter, started doing reconnaissance, and, then they were kind of thwarted.
Что предотвратили те действия команды,
does the CEO understand what, it could have meant for the company? 5 years ago, very few CEOs would understand that. Very few top managers had a good clue of what the repercussions, what the consequences could be. Fortunately, this has changed.
Оценку эффективности.
To answer your initial question regarding assessment, I certainly subscribe to as practical assessments as possible.
Чтобы не взломали.
So, not being hacked,
есть определенный ряд звездочек и условий, которых нужно...
although obviously there should be some caveats here. You know, there are some conditions that need to be observed by the client
для того, чтобы действительно иметь такую возможность, вот такую гарантированную, как цель.
in order to have, well, a kind of a guarantee against that.
Для внешнего я прям эту
For
историю...
in-house and commercial SOC, that would be the KPI I would go for. And for a commercial SOC, like if you've been hacked, having observed, you know, the conditions, like you guarantee a payout. If the SOC has not protected you, they gotta pay for that. Like a failure fee. Sounds like a good idea, right? But, you know, certain conditions need to be satisfied.
Эффективный тот сок, когда нет инцидентов.
An effective SOC is the one that ensures you do not have materially important incidents. Like if you discover those incidents before there has been any impact on services, you know, before, you know, any encryption of the infrastructure has happened, before data has been leaked and so on. You can quantify it differently. Like you can combine it with some risk model, or you can talk about it in the language of inadmissible events, but sooner or later,
То изменение, которое будет точно происходить, как бы, это умение...
It drops the subject. The change that is going to happen is, I think, the ability to properly represent what SOC is doing in terms that business can relate to. We will be going in this direction. So translating this lack of losses into a particular metric is, you know, still an outstanding question. I still have not seen any methodology that would get us there, but we should get there pretty soon, I think. We need to learn the right language to talk about it.
Почему нет? Потому что мы не интересны кому-то.
Well, because, you know, business users still do not understand that, you know, we have not been hacked because we are doing our job well, not because we are not of interest to the hackers. Well, you can also say, well, you know, I'm sorry, we can run a bug bounty. Well, you will not expose your whole infrastructure to bug bounty. Why not? Well, you won't. Show me a single company that would expose their whole infrastructure in a bug bounty process. Sergey, before you stepped into the subject, I was wary of talking about it. You know, we've tried those things, but does anybody need that? You know, we've offered those things. So, you know, we will take, say, the weighted average salary of your employees. So imagine that it takes you, say, 3 hours to, you know, restore the laptop, for example, multiply this, you know, by the amount they would have made in 3 hours and so on. We even include it in our pre-sale cycle.
Не самый острый карандаш, но все равно. И в итоге, ну это просто за последние 4 года это
over the past 4 years,
но нам это не...
He has not really secured a single sale. I mean, people said, well, it's nice. And you know what? Every risk manager will make a very short work of such statements very quickly.
Значит, смотрите, у нас есть не только люди, процессы, технологии, у нас еще есть сервисы.
Well, besides people, processes, and technologies, we also have services. If we want to measure our own effectiveness in the sense of SOCs, we do care about that a lot. That's only natural. So, in order for us to know that what we are doing is done at the right level of effectiveness, well, we certainly want to see some metrics. If we are providing services externally, well, there is this notion of services, and then our users will want to know that we are doing a good thing and that we are creating enough value for them. So it goes without saying. You know, if you're buying something, you may want to know how you're going to see, like, if it's effective or not. Say, if I'm buying a toothbrush, well, I want it to be good at brushing my teeth and last some reasonable amount of time. Clients usually do not propose metrics for that. And if you look up the classical tools, you won't find anything new. Time to response, Time to containment. What's the Russian for that? TTC?
Но
Right.
смотрите, можно вот что предложить, и мы это используем у себя внутри.
Now, what can be offered, and this is something that we are using internally in our SOC.
Меня мерит по количеству пропусков.
You know, she uses this KPI for me, like the number of incidents that kind of happened. Like they did not result in any material damage. But, you know, the techniques that we missed, although we could detect them, like this is a metric we have for the internal SOC.
Это рабочий вариант, я сейчас не фантазирую.
Like, this is really being used. I'm not daydreaming. Secondly, if we've already been hacked, we can check how long it took us to discover we've been hacked. Did it take 5 minutes? 3 weeks? Another important one is assessing or measuring the time it took the analyst to wake up to what's happening and what's the probability that he actually gets it right. Because we are saying, for example, that there are some rules where analysts are getting it wrong on a regular basis. Maybe we don't have enough TI, or maybe we have reached to retrain our analysts. So to summarize it all,
Если мы с вами там что-то покупаем или что-то делаем, нам нужно...
If we are buying something or if we're doing something, it's important for us to have a proper understanding
нами ожидаемую ценность. И когда мы...
of the kind of value it's going to create for us. Once we realize what the value is, we should be able to propose metrics. Now, the biggest problem we have is that we do not have a granular understanding of the problem. Once we do that, we will be able to come up with good solutions. So we first measure, and then we propose solutions. Something like that. Yes, thank you, Sergey.
Тему сервисов.
Now you've touched upon the subject of services. Can we discuss briefly?
Какие сервисы в будущем будут
Which services in the future
клиентов и какие
will be available for the clients?
предъявлять клиентам, поскольку, как мы поняли, основная проблема не в соках, да, или не так?
I'm sorry. You've just been telling that SOCs are not the biggest problem.
Мы будем делать основной упор.
So we've just been talking about it, haven't we?
Разведку, как бы это ни звучало, на профилирование ландшафта угроз, на атрибуцию.
We will focus on attribution and profiling the landscape and doing reconnaissance. And it's not just because, we're very smart, If you look at NIST framework number 2, for example, you will see that most methods related to the InfoSec cycle, they will require cyber threat intel.
Не могу не вставить везде книжку Intelligence-Driven Incident Response.
So, Intelligence-Driven Response, second edition. All the second edition, you say? The third edition is already out. See, that you don't need me in this panel, you have Sergey.
Который мы будем в него вкладываться, и мне кажется, он будет востребован. Как один короткий пример, чтобы не отнимать.
So I think this is something important. We will invest in that.
Кажется, что соки должны...
I think...
Нет, не так. Кажется, что заказчики должны понять,
что
соки хотят
clients should understand that SOCs want to create value. No, clients don't owe you anything.
Мы в этой концепции будем жить. Мы
Let's just stick to this idea. We're like barbers. Imagine you tell your clients, do not ever come to my barber shop being bald. Oh, right, one bald person telling another bald person, right?
И это вот яркий пример, кстати, на тему разбора логов, да, вот Кубер.
This makes me think of the luggage.
Там столько всего лишнего, там это просто жесть.
Like Uber log is so bad, so much noise there.
Инструменты по контейнер.
So it's only natural that, container security tools emerge and they become tools or add-ons for SOCs.
Бизнесу. Вторая история, кажется, что в составе сока должен вот про это... Завтра, может, сегодня на PHD будет рассказ про Team
Applications, касается
вокруг разработки, вокруг там, тех же
everything related to development and applications.
На мой взгляд, вокруг
all this stuff should be consolidated around the SOC.
И опять же, там очень низкое проникновение класса решений типа PAM.
Very low penetration of PAM-level solutions in Russia is another concern. It creates so many issues. Well, because, first your suppliers get hacked, and then you get hacked. They're hacking, great cartoon. I mean, if you have PAM, you can actually see it as a cartoon, as, hackers got into your systems.
Антон, два вопроса.
Anton, there are two questions in one here. Which services will service providers start offering, and what are the requirements for clients?
Если будут. Вот как Сергей сказал, клиенты ничего не должны.
Now, Sergey has just said that clients do not owe you anything. That's true.
Те самые заказчики. И самый популярный, на самом деле, запрос заказчика, по-моему, выглядит примерно...
You know what the most common request from the client is that I'm looking for a silver bullet from all issues and problems. If
ему это сильно проще.
An in-house SOC or an MSSP, it's easier for the in-house SOC, though.
В инфраструктуре клиента многие задачи решать как-то за него, не мешая и не больно.
Can help the clients resolve their issues without creating pain or interruption. Clients will be happy. It's a big question, however, if this is really feasible, if this can be done. Well, just consider InfoSec and IT. In many companies, you will see that the interaction can be very, very different. Like an external service provider, like an external SOC,
с большим набором ограничений. И при этом
will be more constrained than an in-house SOC. Although the same client may be the one that really wants to have this silver bullet.
Странноватый ответ, я понимаю, но
I understand. It sounds like a weird answer to your question. But in fact,
что-то новое или на что-то вообще в сторону рынка, да, и отсюда же вытекают...
It really drives the kind of expectations many clients have, and it also drives some of the proposals you may be hearing from MSSPs. Now, Timur has mentioned cyber intelligence. I believe that the range of expert services is something that clients badly need, and this is something that they, in most cases, simply don't have in cyber intelligence, in, say, forensics or investigation.
И это же хорошая история, которая сейчас работает где-то как prevent, если ты знаешь.
So it could be used for preventative purposes. Like if you know about some techniques and tactics, good for you.
Используешь помощь в случае, когда, не дай бог, что-то случилось.
Хорошо. Вы все говорите
мы с этим вопросом...
новые сервисы? Нет.
Are we still on the same question? No. My question is a question to the service providers. Are you prepared to react to it? Well, we are reacting. We're doing it. I just wanted to learn about the new services of Bison and Kaspersky.
Вопрос к Антону. Антон, а вы вот готовы?
Are you prepared to react and respond? You know what? Acoustically, it's weird. Like, I'm not really able to hear the end of your questions. Are you prepared to respond? Sure we are.
Даже не раз рассказывали на мероприятиях, если я правильно тебя...
And I think that, we've talked about it a lot in various events, even here.
И какие же в этом случае требования к...
So what are the requirements you have for your clients?
Зачастую заказчик сам приходит за помощью, и вот как раз вот...
clients turn to us when they need help. And at this stage,
когда у заказчика сейчас...
we have a very different communication. Like, if the client is already in pain, they are prepared to act fast and change here and now. Like, I had this case 2 weeks ago.
Я бы очень хотел там, в общем...
my hard drive on my laptop died. I really wanted to quickly restore it.
Ну, как бы потому что...
I was in pain.
сделать на это нужно время. Было бы классно,
I knew that, restoring it
и стиль взаимодействия
would take time. I
в
wanted help.
зависимости от инцидента.
So clients are in a similar position, and depending on the incident, their communication style will change. So imagine an incident has happened, and clients often realize they do not have the expertise. They turn to people like us. So naturally, we get to hear such requests on a regular basis. We know what to recommend. You gotta define response here. All service providers are providing localization as a base service, on the basis of ADRs. The full cycle of response, maybe with the exception of restoration, because it's usually to be done by IT guys who work for the same company. You seem to be arguing all the time. Well, obviously, we have been ready for a long time. But in practice, we even provide scenarios. We tell them, well, this is how we are planning to respond. And usually, clients back out of such agreements. Because for them, that's risk. Okay, let's talk about responses. So one case would be an incident that has already happened, like, this stuff got encrypted. I think many people here, have been helping clients like this for at least 5 years, maybe even 10 years. So I guess you must be asking us about, some proactive responding, which is not really a full-scale incident response for retainers. I think everybody's doing that now as well. So this really became a reality, when EDRs became the thing, so to speak. Before EDRs became the thing, so to speak, active response would be linked primarily to firewalls and similar installations, and there was a limit to how much you could do. So imagine that an incident happens and a blockage at the firewall level. But in most cases, you need something different, like killing the process, isolating a particular device or machine. So EDR's emergence made life easier for sure, including data collection, isolation of machines, killing processes. But Timur has correctly pointed out that most clients still have second thoughts about that. However, lately I've seen significantly fewer concerns and significantly less resistance. Many clients who have already installed EDRs, they are open to this idea that we do some responding on our own. So most clients are okay with that. Like, there is a limit to it. They say, well, something certainly needs to be approved by us first. So you're effectively saying that your requirement for your clients is that they have EDRs. For sure. Like, we got to be able to respond somehow through EDRs or at least firewalls. What other technology do you expect them to wield? Is that a requirement besides EDR? We are talking about SOC tech stack, like we used to have CMs and SORs, now we have EDRs and NTAs. Well, naturally, the number of EDRs is going to grow. NTAs, after all, are EDRs under a different name. And look at the foreign players, they also have CDRs and ITDRs. So naturally, the number of DRs will continue to grow. The more DRs we have, the easier it will be for us to respond. But then EDR is effectively the old SIPs, and NTA is the old IBS, and so on. And also there is deception, right? So deception tools are also seeing further use now. But again, is that a dramatic change? No, it isn't. It's just, yet another technology for detection, yet another brick in the wall, or a building brick in your system designed to identify or detect malicious activity. You also need to have a proper asset management system. Like your IT systems, they can be over the board. So ideally, you want to have an InfoSec asset management system. So also threat intelligence, orchestrators, or at least incident management platforms.
где
Think
обрабатывать.
IRPs.
Система для работы с инцидентами, система для работы с
So
активами.
a system to manage assets, a system to manage DI and
много где SOC тоже
assets,
этим
we mentioned
занимается,
them.
это vulnerability management.
And also vulnerability management. Lots of companies have SOCs do that. You've got it so right.
Это про сервисы. Вот мы все оказываем там, плюс-минус MDR, и основная проблема этого сервиса — это...
Most of us do MDR. And the biggest problem of this service is coverage control. Like, we don't see what we don't see.
Я бы это развернул вот в сервис, который, в принципе, запроса на него особенно нету, но он вот...
This is a service for which there is like a low demand, but it's gonna emerge very soon, I think. I'm talking here about attack surface management, and I would also combine it with Timur's idea about threat intelligence. And ERP as well, right? Absolutely.
Вот эта вот история, там, что, опять же, на каждом, это немножко смежное подразделение, но на каждом пентесте там как бы выясняется, что единицы знают свой периметр.
We discover that very few companies really know their perimeter. So, like, understanding where threat actors are going to emerge from is really important to us. And where they can gain hold is also important. So, attack surface management, internally and externally, sounds like a very important thing. I'm not talking about asset management as a whole. That's a tough subject. It will probably stay inside the company, but asset management as a whole, like where we are, where we're not, and which components are active, I think this is a must. And we need it now.
Залу хочу сделать объявление.
I have an announcement to make here.
О котором говорил сейчас Сергей, это
the attack surface management Sergey has been talking about.
Которые сейчас предлагаются Mondian, Group IB, некоторыми другими
компаниями. Now you may be thinking about the products offered by Mondian and Group IB.
О котором сейчас говорил Сергей.
They're just a part of what Sergey has been talking about. I know that some people must be googling for it now. I would also add Darknet to this list.
Тоже некий инсайт. Запись есть, да? Ну, в общем, она стреляет, пацаны. То есть, если там как...
So you know what's happening in Darknet is sort of powerful.
Это уже DRP. Это уже даже...
But this is already DRP, isn't it?
Креды, которые там утекли.
No, what I mean here is that, say, if creds have been leaked,
то есть это рабочая тема,
and you're crawling or tracking for that, that's important. Those who did the report, they know that stealers are now everywhere. So I think this thing is also on the run. And you need TIP to process such data, right?
Хорошо, вы перебрали все технологии текущие, но...
Guys, you've listed all the current technologies. No one has mentioned ML, AI, generative AI, which is surprising. I'm sorry. But this is a technicality. ML could be a building block of what you have. You don't really need ML as such. Like, you're using AI for max patrol, and you're not telling your clients, well, we are selling AI, which has, max patrol attached to it. It's the other way around. We are talking here about the traits or the qualities that the products of the future should hold or should contain.
Там с этим ML я, может, один день хочу провести, чтобы не слышать про это. Есть интересное...
You know what? I'm dreaming of a day when I won't hear about ML even once.
Про ROI.
There was this recent study into the ROI of AI-related technologies. Now, ROI there is 5 to 6% on average. 35 companies in 15 countries. So they talk to CEOs who care about the money. And for the top of the class, it's like 10 to 11%. So yes, there is certainly the AI-ML trend. But I do not believe it will dominate the market. Moreover, it won't be a standalone product, like ML assistant that will help you with everything. It will be elements of ML built into your system in order to do summarization or improve detection. So it will not be a standalone product or a standalone technology. It will be part and parcel of CM or EDR. It will not be a standalone product. which is evidenced by sales of UEBA and other ML-driven products.
Насколько, по крайней мере, мне известно, там большинство...
At least from what I know, most UEBA sales are pretty disastrously low. Like, you won't really go shopping for a car engine.
Кто-то делает.
You usually need cars. Isn't that obvious?
Хорошо. А в связи с этим удастся ли нам все-таки заменить
аналитиков? We will be able to replace line one analysts with AI? No.
Это вопросы из зала, причем здесь...
This question comes from the floor.
Если первая линия
what is the first line?
Лёши Лукацкого, да, то ее и сейчас
If it's a first line done by Лёша Лукацкий, most SOCs don't have it.
Они же там проводят базовые расследования какие-то там.
You know, line one employees often, besides filtering out false positives, they will also investigate kill chains and do so many other great things. So ML should help you make decisions. So these people will also get to learn, how to quickly make decisions because they're getting support from ML. I don't have enough experience in that. But in the latest RSA conference, the new CEO of Splunk, which is one of the leaders in automation, he said that Splunk is not going to do any, autonomy, and he listed so many reasons. I believe that the first line in InfoSec, as I learned when it just came into the industry, is gone by now, in any case. So I think the ML is not going to replace people, but, it will give the analysts, for example, an opportunity to train models rather than, doing routine stuff.
Ну, то есть та первая линия, о которой все говорят, что она будет заменена, это люди, которые действуют.
The first line to be replaced is the people implementing playbooks. I don't think a single mature SOC in Russia has people like this left. So our definition of the first line has significantly evolved. Okay, and how are the requirements for the first line and, generally speaking, analysts of a SOC changing? Now, the students that come for internships, their training time, their internship can change. These are the people listening to us right now, and our requirements for them don't change.
Леша правильно сказал.
I think Lyosh is right. We all understand different things when we say the first line. Let's take a step back. You know what? Some people even believe that SOC is like an analytical superstructure on top of your IDS. And I think that we should also be talking the same way about the analytical tasks of the first line. Well, we have first line, and I certainly don't want to feel, bad or concerned about their future. And you know what? Some of these people turn into our analysts. We love them. They make quite a journey. And you know what?
Бот уровня робота Макса, помощника с госуслуг, там, не знаю, помогающего разобраться в...
there are some assistants out there, virtual assistants, that are not that good.
Где возьмутся эти люди, которые будут вот это дело подтверждать?
And you know what? We will need people capable of working with virtual assistants and will do the report cards, for example. Let me summarize it all.
Email, email, он, это машина, модель с учителем, да, то есть это вот
ML usually supervised machine learning. Data markup is done by the SOC analyst.
Наш email, там email, который ребят используются, он
now the ML we're using is getting trained on the data that was, previously dealt with by first line or second line analysts. So on YouTube, there are those multi-instrumentalists. They play something, they record it, and then they record themselves performing on a different musical instrument. ML is like this. It gets trained on some cases, and then it can do similar cases without human intervention. And the more it gets trained, the better it will be. It's a kind of attempt of performing what he has already learned. Well, there are certainly issues such as model drift or parameter drift. If you've done ML, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it sort of partially explains why they hallucinate and why they make it wrong. And the future is not exactly like the past. So what I'm trying to say is that, some standard commodity cases will be taken over by ML. So the threshold of incidents that will be dealt by the analysts in terms of their complexity, in terms of them being difficult to statistically predict, will change, will increase. And Kaspersky Labs has got quite a lot of experience in this respect. Now, we call it auto woodpecker or after data. Like we identify 400 samples of malware per day. Obviously, it's not done manually. It's done in an automated way, and ML plays a role in that. So there is a share of these complex cases which are treated or, analyzed by the analysts manually. But, nearly all of them are done by ML. So this experience of threat research, in my opinion, shows very vividly what the future of SOC is going to be. The typical cases, we are not going to see that. So there was a time when we analyzed malware on our own. Now it's all done by the AVs. And, it's done in sandboxes as well. The same, I think, is true for threat intelligence. Yes, thank you very much, Sergey. Guys, thank you very much for sharing your practical views on the current SOCs and the future SOCs. Let's try to summarize this session. How about each of you takes a minute, no more, to tell us which strategies and practices to embrace to be successful in the future?
Давайте я начну.
How about I start?
Кажется, что первое, что нужно сделать, это решение вполне конкретных задач.
Is to focus the SOC on addressing specific problems.
Много говорили про то, что ландшафт киберугроз.
A lot has been said about the landscape of cyber threats not getting easier, so to speak, anytime soon. Even if things start improving compared to what they are now, and they're not great, I think that the level of, say, cyber threats or cybercrime will go down, but not more than by 15%. So I think that, we need to profile SOC based on external attacks. And for internal threats, we need a different approach, which is primarily organizational. Secondly,
которые увлекаются кибербезом.
I think that the number of people interested in infosecurity is limited, is finite.
В нашей стране не будет всем достаточного количества специалистов СОК.
And this country will never have enough highly qualified SOC talent. Which means that, people will, if some companies, brothers, see the inflation in salaries right now. Just talk to HR people, they'll tell you how much demand for SOC analysts is there right now. However, processes take a very long time to fix, and cyber attacks get more and more advanced. Many service providers become vendors, many vendors become service providers, which is not surprising. So I believe that fine-tuning technologies, given that we're strapped for talent and that processes are still immature, is the only thing we can do in the near future. And that's why all vendors are serious about it.
Да. Наверное, поделю ответ на две части.
I'll structure my answer like this. First, I'll talk about the existing SOCs.
Сервис-провайдеры. Кажется, что у нас на рынке прям есть сильные игроки.
Well, we do have some pretty strong players in this market. You know, they're good enough to roll with some heavy punches. And they're also sharing their experience, which is good for the industry. There are in-house SOCs, and some of them are really, really good. You know, I'm talking to many SOC managers, and I can tell you, I'm pretty amazed quite often. And they also understand like what makes their in-house SOC very special. Those who don't have SOCs, some have SOCs and they're not good enough, and they have incidents, or even worse, they don't have incidents, or at least think they don't have incidents. Now, my recommendation would be to see exactly what you're trying to protect and why you would need a SOC. Now, we previously mentioned numerous services you could possibly be interested in. It's a matter of basic hygiene if you don't have a SOC yet. Think about, say, ISM. ISM can be simplified to regular perimeter control. This could be done pretty quickly and without significant costs, but many companies don't do this at all. And later on, they run into incidents. SOCs will possibly be unable to help you if your infrastructure is all screwed up. So make sure you use what you already have. Make sure you understand better your processes and your landscape.
Спасибо, Антон.
And move towards new into iterative baby steps. Well, I believe in hyper-automation, not just regular automation, hyper-automation of things happening at SOCs, because this is something that should help us with lack of talent. There will be further implementation of ML, primarily as hyper-automation is concerned.
Тут скорее сейчас не про сервис-провайдеров, а про in-house соки. Сервис-провайдеры так или иначе.
The next one is
это более такой intelligence-driven, как бы.
More about in-house SOCs. I'm talking here about intelligence-driven approach when you're not doing blanket detection, trying to reflect the whole micro matrix. Now you do threat intelligence in order to prioritize the really important efforts.
Используется в тех заказчиках, в тех регионах, в которых мы работаем, а все остальное уже как бы после того, как вот эта база будет сделана.
So you start with things that are most relevant for a given industry and a given geography. Thirdly, we have so many different technologies such as CMSORs, MTA, CDRs.
То есть когда вот эти разрозненные технологии.
But the whole industry is moving towards platforms where these standalone technologies are brought together under the same umbrella, which simplifies working with them, and this creates, some additional synergistic value. It could be CDR, it could be called a SOC platform, but I believe this is something that's also going to happen.
Автоматизировать деятельность аналитиков, то есть проще это делать.
And it can also be used to automate what the analysts are doing. It's naturally easier to do it when you have, say, unified data models, when you have automated, your responses, and when you have some standardized playbooks.
Подытоживая, первое, искренне прошу вас, любых связанных с security operations, переосознать.
If you've got anything to do with security operations, you got to be very aware of the level of responsibility you undertake. Because, jokes aside, with further digitalization, our responsibility will grow exponentially, which means that things are not gonna get easier. If you're hearing that ML or Copilot are gonna make your life easier, don't believe it. Like 10 years ago, all you had to do is know the difference between symmetric and asymmetric encryption. And now you also need to understand mathematics and data science and so many other things in order to be good at SecOps. And that's all because of the inbuilt level of responsibility.
Что-то у меня последние недели лейтмотив, у кого-то я тоже умного услышал.
My leitmotiv of the past week
платить, пожалуйста, ransom. Не ведите переговоры
is that, we should stop paying ransom. Do not negotiate with the terrorists.
Снизится.
Never pay ransom, and this is how you're gonna stop the flood of ransomware. Sergey, very quickly. Automation. Automation is everything. Security analytics platforms is the usual name used here.
Потому что я вижу в этом перспективу.
I believe there is future to that.
Так и в глубоком, поэтому, единственное.
I've been exploring machine learning for a long time.
Это единственное,
and deep learning as well.
Как это называется? Информатизацию, да, вот цифровизацию.
And this is the only thing that can support this digitalization.
Соответственно, нам нужно поддерживать цифровизацию, соответственно, нам нужно масштабировать.
So we need to support digitalization, we need to scale, and in order to scale, we need automation.
Спасибо, друзья.
Thank you very much, dear friends.